He's dead, Jim. Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. We're here in sick bay because we need to address the illness and passing away of Star Trek, the Kelvin timeline. It was announced a few months ago that I think due to the Skydance Interactive merger, buyout, what have you with Paramount, there was conversation about, well, what about Star Trek? What's going on with the Kelvin timeline? Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, that crowd. What are we doing with what J.J. Abrams established with Star Trek as like how to continue the story along? And they basically killed it. It's dead. Or they have no intention. They're moving on. So we're here in sick bay to kind of commiserate, to do an autopsy, if you will. What did I think of the Chris Pine Kelvin timeline version of Star Trek? I'm kind of glad it's gone, but I don't hate it, or I didn't hate it at first. So, briefly, I think it's worth noting that I came to Star Trek knowing the original series, eventually developing an appreciation for the Next Generation, and then all that other spin-off stuff. Stuff that existed in the era of Paramount, where it was produced by Harve Bennett. And he's important. He actually makes an appearance in, of all things, Star Trek V. There's a very short bit where he's one of the admirals. Harve Bennett had neat alternative ideas to what Star Trek should be all about. He was behind the funding for some of the good stuff, Star Trek II, for example. But I remember hearing, after the success of Star Trek IV, what are they going to do for the next movie? Because Shatner and crew are getting up there in the years. And at the time, I knew Richard Arnold, who I've talked about before. He was a friend of mine who worked on Star Trek, personal assistant to Gene Roddenberry himself. Great resource for all things Star Trek. And Richard told me around the time, when Star Trek IV had, I guess, early 90s, Richard was saying that, like, Harve Bennett wants to do this thing where, since Star Trek IV was so funny, why don't we do Star Trek V as, like, Police Academy, where it's young Kirk and Spock, and they meet in the academy, and there's all these hijinks that go on. Stuff like you would get in Police Academy, which was successful at the time. And I just thought, really? That they're going to do that? Are you nuts? First of all, don't recast Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. That's never going to work. Secondly, leaning into the comedy of it, that's a bad idea. This is not going to work. And then, fortunately, Star Trek V came along and was not very good. And maybe my memory is wrong. Was it Star Trek 6? I could be switching that around. Maybe Star Trek 6 was going to be the Police Academy movie. I'd have to look that up. It'd be hard to do because it was all just rumors in the 80s/early 90s. So it's not like there's internet basis for any of this stuff. Regardless, Harve Bennett wanted to make Police Academy in Star Trek. And I just thought that is the dumbest damn idea I've ever heard of in my life. They're gonna kill it. It never happened. You had Star Trek V, which was not good. And then you had Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country, very good, very well embraced by the fans, a way to pass the torch to the next generation. Cool. I came to, when they announced that J.J. Abrams was going to reboot Star Trek and was going to have a young Kirk and Spock meet, I just thought, oh God, this is that Police Academy idea all over again, isn't it? And the very first trailer where they showed Chris Pine pulling up on his motorbike and watching the Enterprise being built on the ground, I just thought, oh my God, this is like Melrose Place Star Trek, 90210. What the... This is going to be terrible. But I thought, well, that's where we are with Star Trek. So let's try it out. And it was fine, actually. The plot has serious problems. There are holes in the logic of the story. But if you go past that, it was actually okay for me. The idea of somebody replacing William Shatner as Kirk was ridiculous to me, but Chris Pine did an awesome job. I remember, I mean, he's a cool guy and he's like a ladies' man and he's doing that kind of thing. And okay, sure, anybody could probably do that for a Shatner reimagining, etc. But there were funny bits in the movie that I quite appreciated. Like Chris Pine took upon himself a bit of a humbling level and was jokey. Like there's a bit where Kirk's in the episode, I can't remember what, or in the movie, I can't remember what happens, but his hands balloon up and he's incapable of functioning. And I thought, oh, Chris Pine doesn't mind being a little, self-deprecating and funny and poking fun at himself. I thought, I like this guy. I don't mind this. This is okay. Carl Urban as McCoy was very, very good. I remember an interview with him where he said, yeah, I watched a lot of DeForest Kelley from back in the day, and I knew there was like this zany element to him. And I thought, yeah, okay, you've got it. Zachary Quinto, a very good Spock. I remember an interview with him where there's a shot of him and Leonard Nimoy together, and Leonard Nimoy just turns to him and says, dude, you're screwed. Like, they're going to love you as Spock forever like they did with me. Some choices were a bit weird. Zoe Saldana as Uhura. Now, I get that Uhura is a very important character for a big swath of sci-fi fans, and Zoe Saldana was like leaning into that. But she does that a lot in a lot of her roles where she's very much, it's her, but now with Uhura's skirt on, and I was just like, well, she's okay. They didn't know what to do with her in later movies, to be perfectly honest. In the original series, there was a sort of an idea that that Uhura and Spock Uhura had a bit of a crush on Spock minorly, but in the new J.J. Abrams, where they lean into it hard, they're totally boyfriend-girlfriend, and drama-rama ensues, because this is high school. And I was just like, okay, this is dumb. And certainly in the other two movies that followed, there was nothing for them to do with Uhura. So, now to round out, guy playing Sulu was awesome, but the guy playing Chekhov, though he was very good, Anton Yelchin, he was very good. And I remember interviews with him saying, yeah, it's nice to finally have somebody who can genuinely do a Russian accent play this part. Walter Koenig, what are you going to do? Walter Koenig would probably agree, but regardless. Unfortunately, just after the third film, 2016, 2017, Anton Yelchin died. So now you've got a sudden problem that I'm sure a lot of modern film production companies are like, oh God, one of our cast died. What do we do? And if it was just some generic red shirt guy in the background or somebody who helped Scotty in engineering, yeah, no big deal. But to suddenly lose Chekhov, one of the cornerstones of Star Trek, do you recast him? What do you do? And I think they delayed and labored and they thought, let's just wait this out till we figure out what we're going to do. There was a Star Trek 4 that was going to be made with the Chris Pine crew and never actually ended up happening. And now it's like, okay, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. And as I talked about a few videos in Star Trek ago, is Star Trek all about Kirk? They now have a new guy in the Strange New Worlds timeline to be our Kirk. We don't need Chris Pines, even though Chris Pines is actually a very good version of Kirk. We don't need that. We don't need that timeline. We don't need those movies. The second two, Star Trek Beyond and Star Trek Into Darkness, they didn't do very well. And they were dumb. And at a certain point, the studios have got to be going, why are we making these if the fans have never really embraced them? The average movie-going public doesn't really want to see it. And we have other Star Treks anyway. We have Discovery, Your Strange New Worlds. We have stuff we're doing with Star Trek, Below Decks. We have stuff we're doing. We don't need this particular branch of Star Trek to keep the dream alive, so away it goes. And I'm not sad to see it go. I really liked Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban, awesome guy, but where they were going, was it Nurse Chapel or was it another doctor who was stripped down to her underwear? Like, do you have to go there, JJ? Like, do we have to do that? And a lot of the representation for the admirals and stuff were very like, oh, it's going to be my way, Kirk, or you're out, and you're going to be up for a court-martial. We are admirals, and we will push the military. And it's like, okay. Anybody who knows Star Trek, anybody who knows Gene Roddenberry, like my friend Richard Arnold did, will know Gene was never about the military. That is not what Star Trek is. So for the J.J. Abrams version to be very gung-ho, in-your-face action, militaristic was a disappointment for a real Star Trek fan. So, I don't particularly care that they're not going to make any more. It's fine. I see their reasons, and I think Hollywood's going through a whole bunch of changes, and like, this didn't work, let's toss this out, let's buy this up, let's rehash the same stuff over and over again, because we can't make anything new. Having said that, Chris Pine was in a D&D movie that was really, really awesome. There's something new. And you know what? I've heard people say, yeah, they're not going to make any more of those either, because it didn't do the numbers they wanted it to do. Are you kidding me? It did very well. Or if we're going to do it, we're going to make it low budget. Okay, fine. Whatever. That's where Hollywood is. That's why Star Trek, this Kelvin timeline it is referred to, is in sickbay. Announced to be dead. Pronounced dead. Dead on arrival. Well, no, it had 3 movies. They tried what they could. It's got a really good pinball game. But regardless, I think that is it for this version, this vision of Star Trek, and I'm perfectly fine with saying goodbye to it. So, I'm going to leave it there. No more Kelvin line Star Trek. That's fine by me. There's a lot of it, and I don't even watch any of the stuff that's around right now anyway. I might try Strange New Worlds. I've been hearing good things, but I don't care. Anyway, sorry, if there are big fans of the other versions of Star Trek that exist right now, please convince me. Tell me stuff. Recommend something. Is Below Decks worth checking out? I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to get back up to the bridge, and I'm going to leave it there. So, until next time, I'll see you down the rabbit hole.